Hej och välkomna till Ntd Nyheter. Jag heter Cecilia Samuelsson. Här är våra rubriker. Syskon delar livet som Shen Yun-dansare NTD får en exklusiv intervju. Ntd specialserie om kommunismen fortsätter, denna gång om President Roosevelts New Deal till den progressiva rörelsen. Sverigeaktuella Shen Yun från New York är ett dans- och musikkompani på världsturné och denna vecka uppträder Shen Yun på Cirkus i Stockholm. Det vi ser på scenen är resultatet av många års hårt arbete, så hur är det egentligen bakom ridån? Och hur är livet som dansare i Shen Yun? Evelyn Lee på NTD Good Morning satte sig ner med 2 solodansare för att prata om detta.
We have all seen the posters and videos. Shen Yun Performing Arts is coming to a city near you. A troupe that is known to be the best worldwide for traditional Chinese dance. But what we see on stage is a result of years of hard work. So what's it really like behind the curtain, and what is life like as a Shen Yun dancer? We have the pleasure to welcome Marilyn Yang and William Lee with us today to talk about this. And what many don't actually know is that they're siblings. So welcome to both of you. So what is it like? What was your childhood essentially like? Because that involves a lot of hard training and work and discipline at such a young age.
Yeah, I mean, once you start dancing, it's like you flip your world upside down. You're training for hours every single day, so you have a lot of basic dance training, but on top of that, also rehearsals. So every year we're putting on a completely new performance. That means we're on the road for 6 months and also at the base in New York for 6 months, and it's just a lot of training, very physical, but also a lot of mental. It's very mental because I mean, learning movements is tiring, it's hard, and you have to use your brain just as much as your body.
How did you even get, or how did either of you get to start to be dancers in Shen Yun? How did this come about?
Well, I'll start with me first, and my mom is a singer and my dad actually directs movies and produces movies, so
wow,
pretty involved in the arts, and my mom wanted me to try dancing when I was a young age. It seems like something that's a little bit odd for a young boy to try, but once I got into it, I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the history that comes along with learning traditional classical Chinese dance, and also just, it's actually very physical, so that was actually quite fun.
That's nice, so that it was fun on top of all this hard work. And then you decided to, let's say, follow in his footsteps, right? Even though did he tell you about how much hard work that would be?
He likes to say that I followed in his footsteps, but for me, I think it was more like, I mean, when I watched the show, naturally, I was really awestruck with the female dancers, so it was definitely more of like that I was going for. Like, I wanted to pursue that brilliance on stage. Like, it's just a really nice experience. Even when I was a small kid, it was like one of my deepest memories. I just kind of went blind into it, and of course it was like a shocking change in lifestyle and everything, but it's definitely, I think he supported me coming and joining Shen Yun because he knew how much it benefited his life, and it really made, I think, a change for all of us.
So when you went into it, how did you feel like, was there when you found out what it actually involves, how was that like for you?
I think at first it was more like, oh, the show's so pretty and you just want to be on stage and just perform. But I think there's a lot that came into it that it's like, it changed me as a character, and definitely a lot of, to be able to train and try to become professional at anything, and dance especially, you have to have a lot of self-discipline, and it's a lot more than just the physical aspect, like you said. I think it's a really humbling experience.
Humbling experience. So how was it for you? Was it difficult? I imagine as a 13-year-old boy, you also need to build up that discipline. Was that something difficult to do?
Definitely very difficult, but it's something you need to find what drives you to be a dancer. Like, just going into it because you like it, that's how you start. But as you dance, or doing anything in life, you have to find, when things get tough, what really drives you. And for me, even though I was young at the time, the mission of Shen Yun is actually something that is really amazing. To revive a culture that was almost destroyed, to revive 5,000 years of traditional Chinese culture. And I think when you think about it, even when things get hard, that is actually something that's very inspirational for a young person, and it really drove me through some of the tougher times.
That is incredible that you understand this. How long have you been dancing now, and what keeps you going now?
I started dancing when I was 10 years old. I would say that there's so many aspects to it. I definitely agree that it's something it's hard to wrap your mind around at first at such a young age, that I'm going to be reviving traditional Chinese culture. But as I got more into it, I realized that it's just something it's something that's so much bigger than myself, and it was a really special feeling to know that I'm part of something bigger and I'm part of a team.
What would you say is the hardest part, and what's your favorite part of being a dancer? Who wants to go first?
I would say the hardest part is just trying to become like really skilled at something. It requires a lot of practice, and there's always going to be times when you don't want to get up in the morning to continue like the same schedule. It's just it requires a lot of self-discipline, and I think that's something very challenging, because we always have those lazy days, and
for sure.
yeah, and it's you wanna always be better than the you were yesterday. So if you want to keep on climbing up that hill, really, it's sometimes you just feel like you stay in the same place for a while and you don't really see much improvement. So it takes a lot of, I think, just the mental push to like strive to become better, and know that there's no limit to no limit to how good you can get. So it's always, you got to keep pushing yourself, and I think that's something that's really challenging.
Be better than the you yesterday. That's awesome. What about you?
Something really hard is just the training can get very repetitive. It's almost like you can think about like going to the gym and working out, right? You have to do the same motion every time, the same amount of reps, and you have to keep building on top of that. And then maybe you recover a day, and the next day you want to go back. You're still kind of sore, but you still have to go if you want to improve. So dancing is the same thing. The training is quite repetitive, but what we present on stage every year is still different. So there's both sides of that coin, where it's repetitive training, but new performance for us every year.
So what is your favorite part? Would that be your favorite part, to perform on stage?
You know what's really good about being at Shen Yun is that we perform all over the world. And I started young, but I've traveled to so many different countries, over 100 different cities in the world, performing and presenting classical Chinese dance on stage. It's something that I'm quite proud of, but it's just a really good experience for a young person.
That sounds awesome. You had mentioned before, which is the mission of Shen Yun. So tell me a little bit more about what the mission exactly is and why it resonated with you.
So the mission of Shen Yun is to revive authentic traditional Chinese culture. And why that's important is because the CCP that's in China today, the communist regime tried to systematically destroy traditional Chinese culture when they took over China. So there was a cultural revolution, and they actually systematically tried to destroy Chinese culture. They said that everything that is old is bad, like faith and tradition, all of these things that Chinese people have resonated with and is really the backbone of Chinese civilization for over 5,000 years. They try to get rid of that, because when you are spiritual, you believe in, you have your own beliefs. But when the CCP came in, right, they don't want people to have their own faith and be individuals. They want you to just follow what the CCP says. So really, they actually try to, they had all these different movements trying to destroy culture, and all of a sudden Shen Yun comes in, and we're trying to revive this tradition, revive this culture, which is the backbone of Chinese civilization. And they're actually quite scared of that. So they've interfered with a lot of our performances all over the world.
They interfered? How so?
So for example, when we try to perform in some theaters, for example, in South Korea, in Dominican Republic, and even in America, they would send letters to the theater managers, and they would try to convince them not to host Shen Yun.
Yeah, I think that's good to bring up, because that's a really dark part of history that I think people should be aware of. So why is that so valuable, this traditional Chinese culture, that you want to share it with the world?
I think that traditional Chinese culture, it's so rich with just so many virtues and just so many characteristics on how to be a better person, and that's really embedded in the the ancient Chinese civilization, really the culture is divinely inspired and everything was very spiritually tied. So the history of ancient China was really all about how to become a better person, how to become make society better, I think. And if we were to bring back those values today, that would definitely benefit just our society nowadays too. For us, when we do a lot of these ancient Chinese stories, these characters, we're not necessarily just acting. It's not just an act that we put up, but we really live in these virtues, and we're always trying to cultivate these virtues in ourselves so that we embody them truly. So when we portray them on stage, it's really a realistic portrayal, and it's not something that we're just trying to put on an act for. It's something, I think, because it's so true to ourselves, the audience can really feel how rich and just how accurate.
It feels more genuine if you resonate with that character's emotions or what he's portraying. So for example, Mi Furen, she had to sacrifice for her baby. If you're quite a selfish person, you might not resonate with those feelings or those virtues. And then what you portray on stage is not really going to connect with your character, and it might not connect with your audience. So that's why if you want to portray a character well, you really need to resonate with the values that they represent.
Right. So what exactly does that mean how does that manifest in your life? When you say it represents, you live by those values, what kind of changes do you make to your life to achieve that?
I think it's a lot of the very small things. For example, Monkey King, he went from arrogant to humble. And that means that in your daily life, your actions and what you do should reflect humility, right? I can't go around being like, I'm the best, I can do all this. No, but you should know that there's always someone better than you. And actually in Chinese culture is believed to be divinely inspired. And for me, a lot of the skills and what I've learned in dance, I think is also given to me from the divine. It's not just my own hard work, but that's like something that we believe, Chinese people believe, is from the gods. And even my skills and abilities, I think, are also given to me from the divine as well. There is a saying, 学艺先学做人. So before learning a skill, first learn to be a good person. And that, I think, for a lot of dancers, I think it's very important, because if you're a good person, you can better represent these values on stage. It's like, for example, if I'm telling you, I like watermelon, something very simple, right? We can all. But if I really hated watermelon, I dislike it, but I told you I like watermelon, you would feel something's a little bit off. But if I really like watermelon and I'm telling you I love watermelon, you got to believe me, you got to try this watermelon, you feel different. So the difference is one is true and one is false. But what I'm saying is the same thing.
Yeah, you know what? That makes a lot of sense to me, because when you say something that you don't stand by, it definitely will feel different. Because it sounds like all of this is so much more for you guys than just entertaining the audience. So if the audience would watch the show and would leave the show with just one takeaway, what do you hope it would be?
I think we both agree that it would be hope. Actually, we want the audience to really have a sense of hope after watching our show, and I think that's why it's so meaningful to us to put on our performances. I think one way we would put it is like, there's always, after a storm, there's always a rainbow, and so we want to have our audience really get to experience that and have hope leaving our theater. And I think it really helps that in the sense that we're not just an entertainment show. We're not really just, we don't put it on so you can have just laughs or like just have like a momentary piece of like escape. It's more like we really want you to be able to take away these values, because I think in Shen Yun we have like 20 pieces in our whole program, and each story I think really has a deep moral or something you can learn from, and that really is why I think traditional Chinese culture is so important. It's because each story, it really has something that's meaningful. It has a moral to the story.
The story of Shen Yun is actually a story of hope. Chinese culture was almost destroyed because of the CCP, but Shen Yun was founded in America, where we were able to revive this traditional Chinese culture and share it with the world. And hope is something that is not a value that is only good for the Chinese people. Hope should be something that everyone all over the world can. It's something that everyone can resonate with. this story, and it might just inspire you a little bit in your daily life as well. And along with it is the tradition and virtues of Chinese history and Chinese culture. It's something that's universal. So a really important parts of Chinese culture, such as faith, compassion, and humility, these are all things that we can have a little bit more of in our daily lives.
I just mentioned in the beginning of this interview, you guys are almost off to the airport. You guys are starting your tour. So where can people catch you guys on stage this season?
I'm back in Europe. My company's in Europe.
Yeah. So we have 8 companies and we're traveling all over the world, but check out shenyun.com for specific cities.
So are you going to be in Mexico again?
I will be in Mexico this year. But
okay,
always. If you want to find William Lee, just find him in Mexico.
Okay, maybe I'll come and wave to you from off stage. All right, it was a pleasure talking to you today. It was very insightful. I'm very inspired, I have to say. And if you want to find out more, as William just mentioned, about the performance, feel free to go visit shenyun.com.
Shen Yun uppträder på Cirkus i Stockholm den 27-30 mars och på konsert och kongress i Linköping 31 mars och 1 april. NTD är stolt mediapartner till Shen Yun.
Den är oklanderlig. Den är helt fantastisk. De flyter över scenen. Ja, de låter inte, det hörs inte när de hoppar, de hörs inte när de landar. Det tycker jag också är, och sen att se deras teknik. Flickorna är så otroligt eleganta. Killarna också, de är otroligt duktiga på det de gör, och deras akrobatiska dansare, det är, som sagt, de hörs inte när de landar. Så jag tycker att det här är helt fantastiskt att se. De är så synkroniserade dessutom, vilket det är så svårt. Det här är så svårt att göra.
Obviously, as a dancer, I'm always interested in looking at patterns and choreography and costumes and the sync between all the dancers. And I must say I'm so highly impressed with the level of the dancers, their technique, and just all the concepts are absolutely wonderful, and it's amazing to be taken through this journey of history and watching this beautiful art on stage.
Men en äkta glädje, vackert, fin koreografi, akrobatik, det är ju det, men det är ju dans, det är ju fantastiskt. Jag kan inte beskriva det på ett annat sätt.
When I watch them dance, their emotions are absolutely incredible. Their movement is perfect, but they're also expressing it with their whole bodies and their soul. You can really tell that they're so passionate about dancing, which I appreciate, but also about the Chinese history, to deliver it to us and really show it through their whole body.
Det starkaste intrycket var ju verkligen på hur alla var så synkade. Dels synkade och verkligen förmedlade på ett sätt där du kan se och du verkligen hör instrumenten också. Så att det blev ett helt budskap än att bara se en traditionell dans som man verkligen trodde på att det skulle vara traditionellt inom den kinesiska kulturen. Så det var verkligen fint.
If you haven't seen it before, if you're a dancer or non-dancer, this is definitely a must-see. It's something for everyone. Culture, history, dance, music, art. The orchestra is absolutely sensational as well. And sometimes I just closed my eyes to listen to the music, and it just brought me somewhere else. It was wonderful.
Jag hade inte förberett mig på att det skulle vara livemusik.
Ja, inte.
Och det var verkligen de spelade jättebra. Och det liksom integrerade så väl med deras performance på scenen.
Jo. Och det bidrog också till en starkare inlevelse också.
Jag tror de flesta kommer bli väldigt överraskade. Om de inte har gjort någon som helst undersökning i förkant, så kommer de bli väldigt överraskade, för att det är inte alls som man tror på något sätt. Det är bättre. Mycket bättre.
I've heard about Shen Yun everywhere. I feel like I've seen it everywhere I go when I'm in the US or in Europe or in London. I feel like it's been everywhere, and now it came to Sweden, I thought I must go and see the show.
Torsdagen den 24 oktober 1929 kraschade New York-börsen. Krisen spred sig från finanssektorn till hela ekonomin och inga av de stora industriländerna i väst klarade sig. Arbetslösheten drabbade som mest upp till 1/4 av USAs befolkning, över 30 miljoner människor. Förutom i Sovjetunionen föll industriproduktionen i de stora industriländerna med i snitt 27%. Vi kommer nu att visa del 8 i avsnittet Infiltration i väst i specialserien Hur kommunismens spöke styr världen. Filmen är baserad på boken How the Spectre of Communism is Ruling Our World.
Three, from the New Deal to progressivism. On Thursday, October 24th, 1929, the New York stock market crashed. The crisis spread from the financial sector to the entire economy, sparing none of the major developed nations of the West. Unemployment spiked to over a quarter of the population, and the total number of unemployed exceeded 30 million. Apart from the Soviet Union, industrial production in major industrial countries dropped by an average of 27%. In early 1933, within 100 days of Roosevelt's inauguration, many bills were introduced around the theme of solving the crisis. The policies increased government intervention in the economy and passed major reforms. Congress enacted the Emergency Banking Act, Agricultural Adjustment Act, National Industrial Recovery Act, and Social Security Act. Though Roosevelt's New Deal essentially ended by the outbreak of World War II, many of the institutions and organizations that emerged during the period have continued to shape American society to the present day. Roosevelt issued more executive orders than the total number of such decrees previously issued by all presidents in the 20th century. Nevertheless, the American unemployment rate in the United States did not fall below double digits until the war. The New Deal's real effect was to set the U.S. government on a trajectory of high taxation, big government, and economic interventionism. In his 2017 book, The Big Lie, Exposing the Nazi Roots of the American Left, conservative thinker Dinesh D'Souza argued that the National Recovery Act, which formed the centerpiece of Roosevelt's New Deal, essentially meant the end of the U.S. free market. According to FDR's Folly, a 2003 book by historian Jim Powell, the New Deal prolonged the Great Depression rather than ending it. The Social Security Act and labor laws encouraged further unemployment, while high taxes encumbered healthy business and the like. Economist and Nobel Prize laureate Milton Friedman praised Powell's work, saying, quote, "As Powell demonstrates without a shadow of a doubt, the New Deal hampered recovery from the contraction, prolonged and added to unemployment, and set the stage for ever more intrusive and costly government." President Lyndon Johnson, who took office after the assassination of President Kennedy in 1963, declared a war on poverty in his 1964 State of the Union address and launched the Great Society domestic programs. In a short period of time, Johnson issued a series of executive orders, established new government agencies, reinforced the welfare state, raised taxes, and dramatically expanded the government's authority. It is interesting to note the similarities between President Johnson's administrative measures and a new program of the American Communist Party's new agenda, published in 1966. Gus Hall, General Secretary of the CPUSA, said, quote, "The communist attitude toward the Great Society can be summarized in an old saying that two men sleeping in the same bed can have different dreams. We communists support every measure of the Great Society concept because we dream of socialism." Hall's, quote, "same bed" refers to the Great Society policies. Although the CPUSA also supported the Great Society initiative, the intention of the Johnson administration was to improve the United States under the democratic system. The Communist Party's intention was to ease the United States into socialism step by step. The most serious consequences of the Great Society and the war on poverty are threefold. The increased dependence on welfare discouraged people from working and damaged the family structure. Welfare policies favored single-parent families, in turn encouraging divorce and children born out of wedlock. According to statistics, the rate of children born out of wedlock in 1940 was 3.8% among all newborns. By 1965, this figure had increased to 7.7%. In 1990, 25 years after the Great Society reform, the figure was 28% and again rose to 40% in 2012. The disintegration of the family brought with it a series of widespread consequences, such as an increased financial burden for the government, a soaring crime rate, the decline of family education, families that are stuck in poverty for generations, and a mentality of entitlement, which led to a higher rate of voluntary unemployment. A quote attributed to Scottish historian and jurist Lord Alexander Fraser Tytler says, quote, "A democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. It can only exist until the voters discover that they can vote themselves largesse from the public treasury. From that time on, the majority always votes for the candidate promising the most benefits from the public treasury, with the results that a democracy always collapses over loose fiscal policy, always followed by a dictatorship." As the Chinese saying goes, quote, "From thrift to extravagance is easy, but the opposite is difficult." After people develop a dependence on welfare, it becomes impossible for the government to reduce the scale and types of benefits. The Western welfare state has become a political quagmire for which politicians and officials have no solution. In the 1970s, the extreme left gave up the revolutionary terms that kept the American people on guard and replaced them with the more neutral-sounding liberalism and progressivism. Readers who lived in communist countries are no stranger to the latter, as progress has been used by the Communist Party as a quasi-synonym for communism. For example, the term progressive movement referred to the communist movement, and progressive intellectuals referred to pro-communist individuals or underground members of the Communist Party. Liberalism, meanwhile, is not substantially different from progressivism, as it carries the same connotation of high taxes, expansive welfare, big government, rejection of religion, morality, and tradition, the use of social justice as a political weapon, political correctness, and the militant promotion of feminism, homosexuality, sexual perversity, and the like. We do not intend to point fingers at any political figure or individual, for it is indeed difficult to make correct analysis and judgments in the midst of complex historical developments. It is clear that the specter of communism has been at work in both the East and West since the beginning of the 20th century. When violent revolutions succeeded in the East, it spread the influence of communism to the governments and societies of the West, shifting them ever leftward.
Detta var den andra delen av del 8 i vår specialserie Hur kommunismens spöke styr världen. Hela delen samt andra avsnitt finns på Ntd Sveriges kanaler på YouTube, Facebook och Jing World. Tack för att ni har tittat och på återseende!